Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So the last chapter that I talked about, was one of the key scenes that's in the book, and that's the first appearance of Liet Kynes, where they go out to the desert and they have their first encounter with the worm. So now this next chapter is a pretty interesting one as well. And after reading it, it's actually one I hope is in the upcoming film. So in this chapter, they're back at Arrakis and at the Duke's palace or house or whatever, and Lady Jessica has decided to throw a banquet and invited an array of different guests. And which Duke Leto didn't really want to do this, but Jessica realized it's a good thing to do it because you had to get some kind of a social standing with the people that you're going to be interacting with all the time. And also it's a good way to suss out enemies and kind of see what kind of spies and agents might be in amongst the group. So it has a few different meanings, like that's the whole thing I find cool about this story is everything has like a double meaning to it. The dinner is not just dinner. Banquet is not just a banquet. So they have these array of guests, and they're all milling about, and there's a lot of intrigue in this chapter and stuff like that. And also in this chapter, we find out the fate of the carryall, what happened to it. So among the guests that were invited, some of the more interesting ones that get a lot of the spotlight in this chapter is the Guild Bank representative. And working in tandem with him is the stillsuit manufacturer's daughter. Also, we have the water seller or water dealer, Lengar Butte, and we got Tuke the smuggler. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And so Tuke seems to be working with Liet Kynes. I have a suspicion he might actually be a Fremen as well. So anyway, the chapter starts off with, again, it's just emphasized every chapter of how precious water is on Arrakis. And the Harkonnens had this really degrading tradition where they would, have like almost like wetted towels that they would throw down out at the door for the people, the commoners, the low-class people to kind of grovel at. And they would wring out these almost like towels that sopped up water into people's plates and bowls and stuff like that. And it's just another way to show like how horrible the Harkonnens is every chance they get to degrade people, they'll take their chance to do it. So Duke Leto demands that this has to stop immediately, and he says anyone who wants a cup of water, as long as we're eating, anyone who comes to that door wants a cup of water, as long as we're having this banquet, he demands that you give them to it. Give them the cup. So then all the guests kind of inquire about this new custom and why they're breaking with the old custom, and Duke Leto stands his ground and says, well, customs are going to change around here, almost as a signal, like things are going to be different now that the Harkonnens are gone and the Atreides are here. Things are not going to be the same anymore. And also all the people, Duncan Idaho is in the background in this chapter. Same thing with Gurney Halleck. And Duncan Idaho has been instructed by Hawat to protect Lady Jessica, but also observe her very astutely, because Hawat still thinks that Lady Jessica is the traitor that the Harkonnens have planted in House Atreides. And also this chapter, Duke Leto kind of puts on a bit of an act because he wants everyone to think that he's suspicious of Jessica, even though he isn't, so that will smoke out who the real traitor is. And on top of that, now what I find interesting is all the coded language and double meaning everything has in the conversation over dinner. So you have a bit of competition. You got a bit of people like the kind of like deciding what the pecking order is. You kind of have the Butte, the water seller, who's kind of bragging how much he controls the water on Arrakis and stuff like that. And then they kind of keep their eye on him because he's a water manufacturer, and if he wants to try to disrupt things on Arrakis, he could easily do so. So the Atreides want to be able to either buy him off or find some way to control him. But then the banker, the guild banker, he kind of asserts himself that, his nickname is Susu because that's what people call out for the water seller, Susu Suk. His nickname is Susu because he's got a lot of control of the water, and then he kind of uses that as a subtle way to remind Butte, hey, you might sell a lot of water, but I'm really the guy when it comes to water here on this planet. And so a lot of this chapter kind of revolves around Kynes and this bank representative and Jessica, because as the chapter goes on, and this banking guy kind of calls out a few people. First, he calls out Liet Kynes. He kind of argues with him over some of the workings of Arrakis, and Liet Kynes kind of gets insulted and calls him out and says, "Are you challenging me?" But he immediately backs off. And Jessica notices that the banker, the guild banker, is very frightened of Liet Kynes for some reason that they haven't figured out yet. But Liet Kynes is someone you don't want to mess with. That's what's really taking place in this chapter. And the other thing that's interesting that's done here is where Duke Leto gives a very impassioned speech and quotes some of Gurney's songs, and then raises his flagon full of water as a toast, and then pours it onto the ground. And they kind of do this so Jessica can see the reactions of all the different guests. Some are, don't know what to do. Should they pour their water out? They're kind of nervous. But she noticed that Liet Kynes pours his water from his flagon into a container concealed inside of his cloak. Because the Fremen, no matter what, do not waste water. And the other thing we kind of see in this chapter is that Liet Kynes knows a lot of what's going on with Arrakis, as some of the other as some of the other guests start to argue with him about actual act of terraforming Arrakis. They say it's impossible because there's just simply not enough water on the planet to do it. Where then the Duke demands to know, well, is there enough water to, terraform or change Arrakis into a planet that you could get a cycle going so it could generate its own water and grow plants and all that and be more habitable for human life. And then Liet Kynes kind of dodged the question a little bit and said, well, there may be enough water, I'm not sure. But he knows the answer, and Paul senses that Liet Kynes actually knows the answer. Because as we learn later on in the book, that Liet Kynes and Fremen, this is the Fremen dream, is to change Arrakis into a paradise planet where they would no longer be struggling so hard, and conditions won't be so harsh for the people of Arrakis, because they would transform it into a paradise planet, which I find that kind of interesting, because if you read later on in the books, spoiler warning, but if you read later on in the books, that actually happens. Arrakis does get transformed, but the reason why the Fremen are so powerful and are so strong of a people as they are is because of the way Arrakis is. So I find it interesting that they would want to change that, because what gives them their strength is the harsh environment. But if the more relaxed and more softer the environment would come, that would actually start to erode what makes the Fremen so strong in the first place. And they would eventually, over time, become a softer people. Because they wouldn't have to have these strict rules of conduct and code to live by that keep the Fremen alive. So I always found that kind of interesting, that they want to change what actually makes them so powerful as a people in the first place, is the environment of Arrakis. And which actually happens later on in the books, and you find out that the Fremen, their whole culture actually gets destroyed over the next few books, as a cause of actually getting what they want actually destroys their culture, because their whole culture is built around the struggle for water and survival in the desert. And once that's not a thing anymore, well, there's no purpose for the Fremen culture anymore. It loses its meaning. So I thought that was quite interesting, that that their goal would actually end up changing or dissolving or be the downfall of their own culture and of their strength too as well. And then we have Duke the smuggler, who I suspect is a Fremen, and he's in cahoots with Liet Kynes. They're there together at this kind of in secret at this table. But the other thing that's really cool in this is Jessica uses her Bene Gesserit abilities to, observe the banker very, very closely, and then comes to realize that he and the stillsuit manufacturer's daughter, they're working together, and they're there to actually attempt an assassination upon Paul. And the attempt was actually to have the daughter, the stillsuit manufacturer's daughter, lure Paul in with sex and try to assassinate him that way. And so there's always like danger. And then they realize that this banking guy is actually a Harkonnen agent from all of his body language and stuff like that, because the Bene Gesserit are trained to, be able to spot someone who is an agent, and just by their tones and their mannerisms and how they speak and stuff like that. So she actually comes to realize that, and this is dangerous because this guy is actually from the Space Guild. He's are the guild more on the Harkonnen side than theirs. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And then, of course, Paul also sees it. And then at one point, I'll get to that in a bit. And then during the dinner, Duke Leto actually gets called away. And then he gives like secret code. He gives like Jessica a piece of paper explaining why he has to leave. But even that's coded in language. So it's actually a security thing, not like an actual danger thing, matter that he has to go and deal with. So he leaves, and then Paul is put in his place. And then Paul is kind of challenged a little bit by the banker. And at one point, Paul insults him back, and the banker, Paul tells of an analogy of two fishermen who died. One died, and he was drowned in water because he had boot marks on his shoulders, and the other guy stood on his shoulders to try to get air and drown him, but they both end up drowning. And it was directed at the banker, who was basically trying to throw the water seller under the bus to kind of keep himself afloat there at the dinner table. And so the banker spots this and actually gets really insulted. And this is another thing that gets displayed in this chapter, is the rules around Canley. And that the banker is, depending on your rank and position. Now, this is what I'm getting out of the chapter. I might be wrong, but this is my understanding of it, is that depending on your social rank, and if you're a part of nobility or someone who's on a high social status ladder, you can call out someone and duel them if they insult you or offend you in some way. Because we kind of see that Jessica's worried that this Harkonnen agent might call Paul out in a duel right there on the spot. And so everyone kind of uses coded hand signals to each other so everyone's ready to go at the dinner table. Like, violence is about to erupt at this dinner table. And but then for some unknown reason to Jessica, Liet Kynes intercedes on Paul's behalf, and then the banker backs down because he doesn't want to challenge Paul, because he realizes, well, if I challenge Paul, I'm gonna piss off this Liet guy, and I don't want to tangle with him. And Jessica doesn't really get this, and but of course we know, because they believe that Paul is the Messiah, because Duke and Kynes are Fremen. And he even outright asks Jessica, are you the one who will bring the shortening of the way? And then that translated into the old tongue as the Kwisatz Haderach. So then Jessica wonders, well, was the missionary protectiva, is that another legend they implanted here? Because she wants Paul to be the Kwisatz Haderach really bad, and hopes he is the Kwisatz Haderach. And so that's why they kind of intercede and protect Paul from the banker. So this chapter, I really like this kind of stuff, that like the double language and double meaning, and that's why I really hope that this chapter is in the film as a scene. I think it would be really cool. And but they realize they can't do anything right there on the table, and so they back down from the challenge. They don't go forward with it, and so it's just an interesting thing with the whole rule of Canley. Now, that's how I'm interpreting it from reading this chapter. I might be wrong, but if I am wrong, let me know in the comment section. So now the other thing with this chapter is we discover the fate of the carryall from the last chapter. And the carryall was found to be a Harkonnen agent, was aboard the carryall, overpowered the rest of the crew, and then flew the carryall to another location, tried to sell it. Then he was found by Atreides agents, and then not only that, they captured a shipment of lasguns, which had to make Jessica wonder at the end, because lasguns are extremely dangerous to have on Arrakis, because a lasgun beam can cut through anything, but when it intersects a shield, they basically cancel each other out. The person using the lasgun will cause like a chain reaction explosion that will kill both parties, the one using the shield and one using the lasgun. So it's kind of a weird kind of weapon. It's kind of makes for a weird thing with these two weapons that can cancel each other out. So if you use your shield, or the other person won't dare use their lasgun because of the explosion. So that's an interesting reaction that they put in the book. I thought those two weapons being able to cancel each other out. But since you can't use shields in the desert, you still could use a lasgun, though. Now, there's that. So they got to wonder, like, do the Harkonnens worry about lasguns? Why are they smuggling lasguns on Arrakis? And things like that. So this chapter was a pretty good one. I really liked this one, and had some humor in it with see all these like pompous guests and how phony and fake they are, and Paul spots it immediately, like everyone has like a mask they're putting on, and it's just like how so many of them come off really pretentious and things like that. It made for actually a pretty humorous chapter. And even when Jessica realizes, like, thinks to herself, like, the nickname Susu that the banker has, the still suit manufacturer's daughter calls him Susu, and she just thinks, like, what an idiotic nickname. When I read that, I actually laughed out loud to myself. That was pretty funny. And yeah, no, another really good solid chapter. And now this is the other thing. Like, you can see in Dune how all these chapters have been going through, there hasn't been a lot of action yet. And how Dune is like a pretty slow-paced book through a lot of the story. So like, I'm wondering how much of this is going to be able to translate on the screen, how much of it will be included on screen. And this is where it's so different from Star Wars and stuff, where Star Wars is just geared right for action and designed for action, where this is a more, like, there's action in this scene, but it's not like physical action. It's subtle. It's like intrigue and verbal dueling and things like that, which it's still, I find very interesting, but that's just me. You know, other people might find it really boring. So it'll be interesting to see how this gets handled in the movie, and how much of this kind of stuff is going to be in the movie as well. So I'll wrap it up right there with this chapter. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one.